Hey guys, Deathletter Magic here, and in my first spoiler video, there seemed to be a lot of comments saying, no, actually Mutate is simple, just read the documentation. It goes above or below, and then whatever one is where you use that toughness and power, and then you combine the keywords, and that's it. It's simple. How could you not understand that? To which I would ask, are you new here or something? There is clearly more to it than that. There are more things that can go on in a game than it entered the battlefield and here's its new stats. So to all the arrogant and ignorant people saying, oh, it's simple, it's just, this is all there is to it, and then they try to explain it in like one paragraph, well, I think the best way to outline my issue is basically the comment I left in reply to one of them, because I was getting pretty pissed off at this. Oh, and the basis for almost 90% of the confusion is one statement they made, which is, as a mutating creature spell resolves instead of entering the battlefield, it merges with its target into one creature. So the mutate spell never enters battlefield. Do you guys even realize how much of a problem that is? Where is it? Does it trigger ETB? What type of spell does it become? What zone does it actually reside in? Can I go get the card out of my graveyard? Is it in the graveyard, but it's only under the card as a indicator, like an exile holder pin down card? A lot of issues come up because of this. But there's people who just don't want to read the damn documentation. It's like, oh, well, what about color identity? Just read how color identity works. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of shit to look up, and I think that's just bad design. But there are certain things coming up where the answer is just, I have absolutely no idea, and I hope they make a ruling on it. Otherwise, we're just going to stop and not know what to do. Like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, where you just got to make something up. That's the sign of a bad game, and it's going to give your judges a headache. So in about 20 seconds, I wrote this with very little thought. So if it's over, does the other card trigger a leave the battlefield effect? Because it is technically, now that one's the bottom one, so it's not on the battlefield, right? Because if I were to do it the other way around, then that card's not on the battlefield. What zone does either one of them go to? Do they even leave the zone? Are they both considered in the battlefield? If they're both in the battlefield, then how do you do devotion? What happens if I clone it? That's actually a terrible question. I know exactly how cloning works. You just look at it exactly as is and make a copy of it and ignore all other properties. But then again, temporary boosts from auras are not considered part of cloning. So would that be considered a temporary boost? My guess would be no because of how they phrased it, but I'm guessing. What happens if you flicker it? Because we all know how Eldritch Moon worked when you flickered it. Does the card that would be underneath it if you declared it to be on top, if that's even a necessary declaration to make at casting time instead of at resolution time, if the spell then fails, does the card under it flicker? Because in theory, it would have left the battlefield. Then when you go to declare a top or bottom, oh, is it at resolution or casting time? I already said that. Is it still considered a creature spell? I guess I could probably just look that up in the documentation, but I mean, I don't need 10% of my questions answered. I need 100% of my questions answered. So at this point, why even bother? Do you get creature ETB triggers if it's above or under? What if they're both the same card and they're legendary? That's one they haven't addressed yet, because as they said, instead of entering the battlefield. So technically it never enters the battlefield, but they say it merges, so it's on the battlefield. And it's also the same permanent, but it's literally the same permanent. So is it one permanent or is it two permanents? Do they have the same name? Does the bottom card still have a relevant name? Does it have no name? Is it even considered a card? Can Mutate be stopped by Repudiate or Essence Scatter? I mean, what type of spell or effect even is it? Is it a no action in response to the spell? Is it an ETB no action? What is it? If the bottom card goes to the graveyard, can you technically resurrect it even though it's still the bottom card? Does it even go to the graveyard? I don't think they've even established where the hell it goes, other than they've stated it goes nowhere. Or I should say they stated it doesn't enter the battlefield. But then, like I said, does the bottom card leave the battlefield? Would it trigger a permanent left the battlefield effect? Hell, there's an entire mechanic based off of that. Once you mutate a creature, is it considered the same permanent? And that is incredibly important. In the digital game, permanents are assigned an ID, and in some cases you can like hover over and see them. Like in X-Mage, I think Arena used to do that. They would just be assigned a number. Most people don't know this, but there is that going on in the paper game. You're supposed to kind of mentally, if you need to, number them. Or just give them a unique identifier, like this is creature A, this is creature B now, or like, okay, when you flicker a creature, it enters as a completely new permanent that's never been there before. So for the purposes of, have you controlled it continuously since the beginning of the turn, aka summoning sickness? The second question is it the same permanent? And if the answer is no, well, then it has summoning sickness. So you need to know if it is technically the same permanent. Now, one card does not equal one permanent. Anytime something leaves the battlefield, it enters as a new instance of that card. It is a new permanent with a new unique identifier ID, just invisibly. So now that you've turned it into something else, whether the card was on top or bottom, and especially if it's on top, because that would really not make sense, is it the same permanent? Does it have the same identifier? And if you put the card on top, does it have summoning sickness? Whether you go top or bottom, does it affect, auras or counters attached to the bottom creature? My guess would be no, but they never stated that. So I could go on with my individual examples based on rulings for old cards, but a lot of them aren't in standard, so it's not an immediate pressing issue, but then again, nobody plays standard. So on to the Reddit AMA that just happened. I am not kidding. Let's see, that was Clark, the community team, Eli Schifrin, and Humphreys MTG, some guy named Dave. Oh, IKO set design lead. Okay. I'm just going to refer to him as person who isn't Mark Rosewater, thank God. Although Mutate is such a Mark Rosewater mechanic. Come on. Anyway, they jumped in to do an AMA, and it will be, quote, focused on the rules and mechanics. I wonder why. And you know what? It looks like the top comment, the top reply wonders why as well, because they said, are you holding the AMA for Ico because its rules and mechanics are particularly complicated, or will this be a normal thing going forward? And Clark replies, great question. Initially, the intent from Eli was due to the complications surrounding Mutate. And then he goes on to say some bullshit to try to cover for the fact that, no, it's just Mutate. So as much as I'd love to read through a subreddit bullshit AMA and answer all your questions, I'm not going to do that. It's not my job. It's theirs. I didn't design this shit mechanic. I'll leave it up to them. You thought the second half of this video was going to be me explaining the answer to every question I just proposed. Oh, surely you jest. So one of the moderators trying to make sense of this shitstorm, because boy did they get a barrage of questions. It made my list of issues here look small. Although, I gotta say, I think my list was actually better than the one they made. The top 9 list, according to them, was 1. How does mutating a card that exiles and returns transform like Nissa Vastwood Seer work if it's the top card or if it's not? Yeah, that actually, it's a good point. That's the same as my Flicker question, but whatever. How does mutating a flip card like Aki Lava Runner work if it's the top card or if it's not? If you've read the mechanical description and the rulings for flip cards, it's actually really easy. But anyway, how does mutating a Werewolf DFC or some other DFC double face card that doesn't have to leave the battlefield work if it's the top card or if it's not? Oh, come on, same deal. These are way simpler than mine. If I copy a pile of mutated cards with a clone, what does the copy look like? Everybody's wondering that. It comes down to, is it considered a temporary boost or is it considered like a permanent new trait of the creature? My guess would be permanent, but based on how the cards work and stuff, that doesn't seem to be how it would work. But at this point, it works however they say it works because it doesn't work. So in other words, they just have to make something up. So how does mutating a temporarily a creature thing like a vehicle or animated manland work if it's the top card or if it's not? Simple, it stops being a creature. The real question is what happens when it resumes being a creature later, but it's considered the same permanent. But did the mutate fall off? Well, the card's not on the battlefield anyway. See, that's why it keeps going back to instead of entering the battlefield. That is the most problematic statement with this mutate shit. It can't fall off if it never is on the battlefield. Now, could it, quote, stop applying? Well, I guess, but if you mutated it, but then you sort of enchanted it like a manland, well, the next time it becomes a manland, would it have the same traits? And that's another one where they just have to pull something out of their ass because there's no logical answer. And then when that happens, you're just going to have to know which way that they arbitrarily decided to do it, which means you have to get out your smartphone and hopefully look it up, hopefully on the Gatherer. But are they really going to have 50 rulings sitting there for every single circumstance that could possibly happen? My guess is no, because yes, that would be useful and you could just find it, but it would just make them look so bad. And it would make the design of the mechanic look so bad, so I have a feeling they're just not going to do it. They're just going to tell a judge to either guess, look it up in the extended judge rules, like the actual rule document, or tell the players if it's casual to just guess. Oh, whatever seems most logical to you. Mutating an inanimate object, a vehicle, an artifact with no genes. What seems most logical to me about that? Go back in time and uncreate this shit mechanic. That's what seems most logical to me in that particular circumstance. So then we have the all-time favorite, what happens if I flicker a mutated permanent? How does mutating a morph or manifest creature work if it's the top card or if it's not? Boy, both of those actually are drastically different. Because then it would maintain like manifest or morph, but it shouldn't, because then you'd flip it, but it wouldn't have another side because that other card is either gone or not gone, because it may or may not be considered still in the battlefield, but did it trigger a leave trigger? Because if it did, it would be simultaneous, and then you'd get the manifest effect immediately, or like Ugin's temporary token things. You would get the card, except you wouldn't because it's simultaneous, but it might be a no action because it doesn't go on the trigger as a stack because you can't respond to mutate. If this is making your head hurt, it doesn't, because I trained to be a judge. I'm used to this shit. That's why the initial reaction to this when I looked at how it works was, well, how do these 100 other things work? That's why I said this is the worst, most confusing mechanic I have ever seen in my life. And everybody's like, no, it's simple. It works this way. Well, do I have you convinced yet watching this video? Because if I don't, I can't help you at this point. Like me, Reddit, the wizard staff, random people from my Discord, everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. This is a shitty, overcomplicated, confusing mechanic. Everybody, literally 4 people on the wizard staff have made a statement saying they thought it was a little too complicated. Let's do an AMA about it. So when both me and the wizard staff agree on something, you better watch out because you're wrong. It doesn't occur very often. Oh, with this next one, I do believe they have topped my best question. This one is the new, like, super obscure, what the actual hell would we do under this circumstance? But it's actually relevant to common gameplay. This is the gem right here. If somebody has a big old pile of mutated stuff and their commander is in that pile, what happens? I should just say what happens, period, but they went on. If I hit them with the old leadership vacuum, does the whole pile get command zoned? No. And then any non-commander card is just stuck there. I'm 99% sure. I'm confident I know the answer to that question, but it's pretty funny that they had to put it in the list. If you mutate a creature and whatever one is on the bottom goes, quote, nowhere, or, quote, doesn't enter the battlefield, I mean, the rules say your commander can't go to the command zone unless they leave another zone, I think. So if they're not really leaving the zone, but they're also not really there, they're just in limbo in no zone. This is why you can't have cards or permanents in no zone. They gotta be somewhere, okay? They're either on the stack, in exile, in the graveyard, or in play, or your hand. Or your deck. I don't know. I don't remember which ones are zones and which ones aren't. This is why I wouldn't have passed the judge test. But guys, with Mutate, cards cannot be nowhere, and they just said the cards are nowhere. They have to be somewhere. Because of the rules, the cards have to go somewhere, officially. But they just said, no, it just doesn't enter the battlefield. It just isn't there. Then where the is it? Because I've got 100 other mechanics in the game that want to know where it is. What do I do with it? Can I bring it back? Does it go here, then under this circumstance? Like, just, can I return it to hand if I do this? It can't be nowhere, guys. That don't work. And finally, number 9, if 2 cards on a mutated creature have conflicting abilities, there we go, which ability takes precedence? I assume they mean like undying and like persist. Actually, those wouldn't conflict. They would just both go off and then you wouldn't get the, wait, no, what would happen? Oh, that would be bad. You could just never kill it. Unless it, well, dies and comes back. I don't know. Let me think. It doesn't work like regenerate. I think it does actually leave. So then it would be equivalent to a flicker, which we also don't know how that works. Then they say, does it go by timestamp order? So you have to remember which order they gained the abilities in, which that is actually important for gaining and losing like flying, before it was even considered a token, by the way. If a card has something like an aura attached to it, that says you lose flying, and it had flying, but then later you re-grant it flying permanently, that overrides it because of chronological order, and the aura is not reapplied continuously, so then it actually has flying, despite having an aura on it that says it no longer has flying, and they said it's because of redundant keyword usage. That's the official rule. So now we've got the scenario of, oh, it had flying on the card, then it lost flying, then I gave it a flying counter, then I granted it directly onto the card flying again, and then it was removed again. Or like the counter was removed, and that's the one I'm relying on as the last chronological order one. So do you go up 3, down 2, okay, it has flying, or is it last in wins? They've actually stated it both ways, believe it or not. And, you know, we're out of time. Otherwise, I'd go into, like, the companion, the keyword, and the other questions. Like, if I have Lutri in my sideboard as companion, can I also have it in my presented deck? That's a good question. I've got about, I'd say, 20 companion questions, all of which don't have a direct, clear answer in the existing rules. And see, that's the number one thing about this. I don't care about learning new stuff, and if it's really, really complicated but you can learn it, I mean, okay, it's unfriendly to new people, it's unfriendly to existing players, it's just plain unfriendly, but if it's worth it because it's such a cool new mechanic and a new novel thing that we haven't played with before, and it'll make gameplay more interesting and have new things happen that have never happened since, ever we've started playing Magic, it might be worth it. But in this case, clear as day, no it isn't. Your creature's just going to get blown up anyway. And secondly, the real problem at the end of the day is the sheer volume of things that you would have to look up just to play the game, just to play these cards. Nobody wants to play a game of Magic, and we're talking standard, commander, modern, legacy, or vintage, where you have to stop the game and look something up because you don't know how it works. Then you got to read through mountains of rules and rulings. And then, then another scenario came up. We got to pause the game again while I get out my smartphone, close a bunch of apps, close a bunch of tabs, go to the right website, look it up, then argue about it, then show it to the person, then resume the game, and then do it again, and then do it again. That's a little disruptive, stupid, and boring and annoying. Not to mention the round timer at F&M. And then you look at the volume of judge calls versus the judge staffing. It's just, this is going to be a nightmare. Nothing is good about this. They shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have designed it. And even if people 75% learn how everything that could possibly happen happens, you still got the 25% where you're going to have to whip out a phone and argue about it. That means it's a bad mechanic. It's that simple. I don't care if anybody still says, oh, it's simple. Oh, just, this will never come up. No, it will. You're wrong. It's that simple. I just don't want to hear it from you anymore. The staff, the community, me, everyone with a brain, all the longtime players think are wrong, so just shut the hell up and stay out of my comment section. So, hopefully you guys have a good grasp on just how terrible and how confusing and how stupid this mechanic is now that we dug deep into it. I would recommend, instead of going and wasting your time on like a couple hundred posts on the subreddit, trying to figure out how each individual example works and all this shit, just don't play it. Just boycott it. Just don't buy it. Don't put them in your deck. And avoid it as much as possible. I think that's what everybody's going to do, honestly, because this is just such a shit mechanic. And I would pressure those crooked dumbasses running the Commander format to ban the other 9 companions as well, because that's just not how Commander works. That said, one little extra thing, I can't believe they banned a card just on principle. Just in principle, this shouldn't be in Commander, because it's an extra card and applies 100% of the time, and you can cast it from some zone that doesn't exist. That's not Commander. Okay, if that's the baseline now, I could show you 10 more cards that you should ban under that exact circumstance. I mean, that card that says if you have 200 more cards in your library, win the game, might as well ban that from Commander just on principle, because it would never happen, so why make it legal? Battle of Wits, by the way, look it up, it's hilarious. There's no functional reason to ban it, so that's the difference between that and the Otter, but there's a card that says get to 40 life, win the game. Shouldn't that be banned just on principle and Commander? My opinion is absolutely 100% yes, it should, because it's actually, that's the old way to phrase it, but they never corrected or updated the card. The new way is 20 more than your starting life total. That's how all the new cards are designed, except that one angel that says 25 for some reason. I don't know why they did that. But like the new Ajani says 15 higher than your starting life total, so that you have to actually gain 15. So just in principle, that is broken and not intended for Commander and just wrong. You can just drop it in and win the game. If you somehow cheated in on turn 1, you win at the next upkeep. I mean, the card should be banned. Nobody does that. I don't think there is a way to do that. But just in principle, because it's such a violation of how Commander works, it should be banned. Which is the exact baseline they're using for the Otters. So, like, consistency, maybe? A little consistency would be nice. But as stated, the people who run the Commander ban list are not only crooked as hell and obviously involved in like insider trading on singles. I mean, there's clear evidence that they leaked the bans and unbans ahead of time and are just manipulating the market. But on top of that, they're assholes and they're inconsistent and they're clueless and incompetent at their jobs. So anyway, on that super happy positive note, thanks for watching and I will see you guys next video.